Hello, this is Joe Folkman, and today we're going to talk about unlocking the secrets of inspiring leadership. And I'm here with my good friend and partner, Jack Zenger. And Jack, how you doing?
I'm doing well. And when he says I'm here with my partner, I'm in a separate office from him. We're practicing the physical distance that we're all supposed to be doing.
That's true. We've seen each other once in 3 weeks, I think.
That's right. We're getting good with Zoom.
Except we've been on calls endlessly.
Yeah.
Well, let's begin. And I thought it'd be interesting to look at some global data. We analyzed data from over 110,000 leaders. And I want to show you the profile here.
What you're saying is the average mean scores on 19 differentiating competencies. That data is generated from 110,000 plus leaders. I would particularly call attention to the fourth line down, which shows the results on what we call drives for results. And above that one, a couple of notches, is the one on takes initiative. We're going to be talking about inspiring leadership today, but one of the messages that I hope you leave with is how important it is that inspiring leadership be paired up with a focus on results. So the important point here is people's scores at the current time on drives for results are pretty high. The very lowest score, if you look down at the bottom item is the one called inspires and motivates others. So what we're talking about today is this competency called inspiring and motivating others, which is the one that's done least well as perceived by peers, subordinates, bosses. And it's going to be talked about in tandem with drives for results that tends to get much higher scores.
Well, and so let's really add to this story here by looking at the importance rankings. Again, we took those 19 competencies and we asked people which one was most important. This time we have data from 1.6 million raters. This is a lot of data here, but basically why this story is so interesting is the competency that is dead last on the effectiveness ratings is first on the importance ranking. And you notice that for direct reports, it's got the highest percentage there, and for actually the self-raters, the highest. Notice that drive for results is the highest for manager, that typically people, that's very important. That's the feedback they get from managers. But overall, inspires and motivates others is the most important competency, even though it's the least effective competency. That makes a really good story, I think.
Yeah, and the story is around how do you get good performance out of people? And there are those who would argue that the way to get good performance out of people is to push. And as you see, managers have a very high regard for leaders who push. The other kind of fundamental way to bring about higher performance is what we broadly would refer to as pull. How do you get people to be motivated and want to do it of their own volition because they think it's important, because they're eager and excited about that activity? So we'll be talking today about this interesting combination of push and pull. As a warning to you, the message that we're going to convey is it's not a matter of one or the other, but it's the combination. So Joe?
Yeah, this combination is interesting. We looked at the inspires and motivates and drives for results, and we did this little experiment where we looked at people who are high on one and low on the other. But here's the first part. And again, this is with hundreds of thousands of leaders. We looked at leaders who were at the 75th percentile on inspires and motivates, but below that on drives for results. And then we looked at the best leaders. And we calculated the probability you'd be a great leader, a leader at the 90th percentile. We found out it was only 9% if you were good at A, inspires, but not at B, drives for results. But then we did the opposite. We looked at people who are good at drive for results, but not inspires. A lot of times in organizations, as I'm talking to groups, I say to people, which of those do you think you're better at around here? And they'll say, drive for results. And I say, well, do you think this number is going to be higher or lower? And they say higher. And they're wrong. Which I love that, because it's only 4% if at B but not A. But then you have the combination of both, right? And so A is in 75th percentile or higher, B is 75th percentile or higher. You'd expect 13%, but you actually get 87%. Jack, what's your reaction to that?
Well, and this really tells a story that I hope everyone comes away with, and that is that inspires and motivates is really important, but it's kind of like having two oars in a little rowboat. You don't get very far when you only have one, and it's having the two that work together that produces really great results. So this tells the story that inspires and motivates as a competency is really crucial, but it needs to be accompanied by drives for results.
One of my clients said to me once when I was doing this, they said, well, so do you want us to stop pushing? And I go, that's not the message. Keep pushing,
Yeah, that's right.
but start pulling. And the idea is that you know how to push, you know how to pull. So that's the two together. So here's another graph, Jack. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so here's just another way of viewing this kind of interesting phenomenon. For those people who were low on both driving for results and inspiring behavior, they were at the 27th percentile in terms of the discretionary effort that their subordinates described themselves putting forward. If you look at the leaders who were high on drives for results, but were low on inspires, they were at the 42nd percentile. But notice when you reverse that, those leaders who were high on being inspiring, but not so high in terms of driving for results, pretty close. They are at the 46th percentile. But again, it's when you make that combination of having high scores above the 75th percentile on both of them that you see now a much higher level of discretionary effort being put forth by their subordinates.
So most leaders are better at push, but they would prefer to be better at pull. Let me show you the data. We did an analysis of 110,000 leaders here, and we looked at the percentage of people where push was rated higher than pull. And 76% of the leaders in our database, they had higher scores on push than they had on pull. Only 22% had higher pull ratings than push, and then 2% were equal. So that's clear. That correlates with our first graph when we showed you the effectiveness ratings. But then when we asked people their preference, and when we did this push-pull survey, we actually found, again, that opposite view, that even though people were better at pushing, they wanted to be better at pulling. And this is this funny thing. This goes back and forth, that people want to be inspiring, but they tend to be better at results, at driving. And you can see why that is. I mean, usually as we grow up, I know when my kids were young, I used to wake them up in the morning and I'd pat them on the bottom and I'd say, good morning, honey. It's a great day. You're beautiful. And I'd wake up the boys, hi, buddy. But about 2 minutes before we had to go to school, I'd stand at the door yelling, going, get in the car, right? So we have this thing of we want to be inspiring, but we tend to know how to push more. So you might have some questions at this point. Do you prefer push or pull? Check your email for the self-assessment results. Here's the self-assessment results that come in your email. And basically, you get a score from 0 to 16 on your preference to push or your preference to pull. And again, the higher the preference, the more you want to do that. Now, that's what you'd like to do. But then we also show you your effectiveness scores. And you can see this is on a 5-point scale. And the average score, the average effectiveness rating there is for you. And you can see your average effectiveness rating on pushing and pulling. You can also compare them to our norms of over 100,000 leaders and check to see if your score is above the norm or below the norm to see if you tended to rate yourself high or rate yourself low. So here's some questions you might ask yourself. What impact would improving, inspiring, and motivating have on you in your current job, in this current crisis, and in the future?
The data says something very interesting, and it almost becomes a silver bullet. We'll call it a silver-ish bullet. The thing that is so intriguing about this practice of being more inspiring and motivating is that, as Joe has already said, it is our most differentiating competency. It is the one that is most valued by employees, as our earlier data showed you. It is the one that is most highly correlated with employee engagement. And it is, in general, the best predictor of overall leadership effectiveness. So there's something really special about this inspiring and motivating behavior of leaders. So Joe, our conclusions are that it is the #1 differentiating competency. It does require the partner of drives for results. As you've seen, most leaders tend to like to push rather than pull, but they also recognize that they would benefit from elevating their pull behavior. So
true. And so the question is, well, all right, I want to be more inspiring. What am I going to do? How am I going to do that? And when I ask people, what would you do to be more inspiring? Here's the first thing they come up with: be more perky and positive. And when they think of inspiring leaders, they think about these inspirational speakers, and they're very perky and they're very positive. That's one approach. Another approach might be pep talks. I mean, people are, you think about a coach at halftime and they're, all right, you guys, we got to do it. And a third approach might be high fives. I find that doesn't work. And right now, you shouldn't ever do that because you're germs, and I'm glad we know that right now. What we found is those things, they might work a little bit for some people, but they aren't universal. And trying those things, especially if it's not your style, ends up being a real dud. So we looked at data from 14,000 leaders, 186,000 raters. And what we were looking at is those people that were more inspiring. And we asked the question, what did they do? What was it that made them so inspiring? And what we found were these 10, what we called companion behaviors. These were the enabling behaviors. When people engaged in these behaviors, they helped them to be more inspiring. Now, most people, when they say, I want to be more inspiring, they just draw a blank. They don't know what to do. And what this list is a list of 10 things that help you to be more inspiring. And if you'll engage in these things, they really make a difference. So Jack and I are going to talk about these 10 things and give you some ideas, some tips, and some suggestions about what you could do. The first one is making an emotional connection. Some days when I come to work, I head for my office, I close the door, it's my little cave, and sometimes I'm in a really bad mood, right? And I think, I don't want to talk to anybody. Now, it turns out that sometimes bad moods are contagious. I visited with a CEO one day with a committee, and we were supposed to meet with the CEO at 10 o'clock. at 9:45, somebody knocked at the door and said, the meeting's been canceled. And we said, why? And they said, well, it's not a good day. And I said, how do you know? And they said, everybody knows. You see, bad moods are contagious. And when you bring negative feelings to work, it really affects how people feel. There was an interesting thing when they were taking videos of the teenagers on the beach during this coronavirus. And they interviewed one of the teenagers about coming home from this fun thing on the beach and bringing coronavirus to his grandparents, and how would he feel? And all of a sudden, you could see that kind of sink in, that again, that emotion, and when you bring the emotion into it, it really affects people. You know, it's easy to make a good emotional connection. It doesn't take a lot of time. Sometimes it's just a, how you doing, or great to see you, or even better, thank you very much for all the work that you've done. But the more you can do that, and the more you can emotionally connect with people, the more you're perceived as an inspiring leader.
The second technique that our research identified was setting stretch goals. And you know, I've thought about this as it pertains to this current situation we're all in. We've been asked to wash our hands more frequently and in a more thorough manner than we have. And you know, I've washed my hands, I think, all my life, but I must confess I haven't taken 20 minutes. And I haven't gone around my thumbs, and I haven't done the back of my hands as well as the palm of my hands. And I think it's just, you know, washing hands, staying 6 feet away from other people, wearing a mask when you go out in public. These are kind of some just pretty current stretch goals that have been given to us. But it's amazing how when you challenge people with a very specific thing to do, the percentage of people who will say, oh, okay, I can see this is really for the good of society. Joe?
Next one is this clear vision and direction. And it was interesting. I was talking to my kids a long time ago, and I said, okay, so I want you to wash the dishes every night for a month. And they said, well, that's a really bad idea. We don't want to do that. I said, well, there's a payment. I will give you $1 million. That's choice one. Or I'll give you $1 if you do it on day one. I'll give you $2 on day two and $4 on day three. And I'll double it every day. So which would you like, the $1 million or $1 per day one? And they all said, we'll take the million. And you know, that's a bad choice, because it ends up, if you took that one doubled on day 21, you'd have $1 million. And if you've got a 31-day month, you've got $1 billion on day 31. And that is exactly what this strategy that the doctors and the politicians have talked to us about. It's amazing right now how many people, if you say flattening the curve, they know what that means. They know exactly what that means. They're very clear about this exponential growth of having coronavirus. In fact, one person that doesn't do distancing and is mingling and is out in the public could actually infect 59,000 other people. Helping people understand that. And what we've seen is these government leaders, these doctors like Dr. Fauci, they have done such a great job of communicating this. But what I want to emphasize is they didn't communicate it once. I mean, they said it one day and then they say it the next day, and they stay on message. And I know a lot of people, senior leaders, when they communicate the strategy, they give one stirring speech and say, well, everybody's got it, and they don't. They need to be reminded every day of what the strategy is, how it works, and why it's going to make that organization successful. That's a great example, Jack. I know you believe that too.
Yes. which takes us to the fourth inspiring behavior, and that is communicating powerfully and prolifically. And certainly if there's been ever an event in my memory wherein we've seen good examples of communication and unfortunately some not so good examples. From my perspective, the good examples have been those who were clear, they were direct, they were personal, they were credible, they talked from their experience, they were straight from the shoulder. And then we've had some that were kind of wishy-washy, changing their minds, ambiguous, perceived as being self-serving. So this fourth behavior or fourth technique is communicating powerfully and prolifically. Joe?
Well, and it's so true. And by the way, if this is interesting to you, a couple of weeks ago, we did a webcast on communication, and you can find that online, and you may want to watch that. The fifth thing is developing others, the fifth companion behavior. Think about somebody who's helped you develop, somebody who's been a coach or mentor to you, and how do you feel about that person? I think about somebody who's done that for me, and I just love them, and I really appreciate them. I mean, if you go to work every day and work real hard and get a paycheck, well, that's a job. But if you go to work every day, work real hard, and you learn something new, that's a career. And people want to learn, they want to grow, they want to develop. And if you want to be an inspiring leader, find somebody that needs to develop, that needs to learn, that where they can learn a new skill that you can help them. And sometimes all you need to do is give them an assignment that helps them learn that skill. Give them the opportunity to learn, and they'll learn the skill by themselves.
The sixth technique for inspiring and motivating people is being a better collaborator, being a better team player. I guess if there's one message that has come through so consistently from so many of the news commentators, our political leaders, it's been this message, we're in this together. And I think we've all kind of had examples of feeling the power of being a member of a team. That collaboration often comes from little acts of kindness. We've got some friends who once a week bring us by a wonderful loaf of bread. But imagine living through this experience if you were kind of off all by yourself. It would be simpler in terms of the social distancing issues. But imagine not being able to share such a complex, profound event if you were alone. So the number 6, collaboration, teamwork. Joe?
You know, Jack, I think about this atmosphere in a lot of these hospitals and why people even go to work and how difficult it is. But it's the teamwork and the collaboration, and they're doing it together, and the cause they have. It's amazing what they're doing. Next one is fostering innovation. And what's fascinating about this is that when something is innovative, it's always inspiring. A friend of mine and I were having lunch one day, and my friend said to me, I hate voicemail. And I said, I hate it too. And I said, what do you hate about it? He says, you know, I hate it when people give a message, and at the end of the message, they leave their phone number, and they say it so fast, I can't copy it down, and they sort of mumble it, and I have to listen to the whole message again before I can you know, in order to get that phone number. And sometimes I have to listen to it 2 or 3 times. And I said, Nigel, do you know about the 3 button? He says, what's the you know, the 4 button? The 4 button. What happens when you hit the 4 button? Well, the email or the voicemail backs up 30 seconds. And when I told Nigel this, he goes, wow, you've just inspired me. You've just saved time almost every day. You know, there's so many opportunities for us to find an innovative way to do things. And I think one of the innovative solutions to this coronavirus is testing. Now, somebody on this webcast has figured out a better way to do testing, a quicker way to get results. We need 1 million of these or 2 million of these every day. And if we could do that, we could make a lot of progress on this coronavirus. So let's find an innovative way to solve this problem. There's got to be a better way. Jack?
The eighth inspiring behavior that we would call your attention to is just the ability to take initiative, to be the one who gets something started. And I must confess that I have been very moved by the acts of a few people through this pandemic experience. I've not been a big fan of Lady Gaga personally, but the fact that she pulled together this wonderfully long program that was broadcast over 100 channels of television worldwide and raised, $120 million for the World Health Organization and other charitable causes, that really has moved me. My wife and I were talking the other night about the fact that we've never been great fans of Sean Penn, but we've seen him interviewed and heard about the kind of charitable initiatives that he's put forward and the good that he's done in different parts of the world that were just facing very challenging times and periods. And I just have an enormous amount of respect. Or a person like Jimmy Kimmel, who rather than firing all of his staff and doing his broadcasts from his basement, he guaranteed them full pay and maintained his workforce through this period of time. And you see a philanthropist like Bill Gates who takes this initiative to tackle tough world problems, and this willingness to say, I'm the one, I will lead out, is inspiring and motivating behavior.
That really is, and it's a great example. I love this John Krasinski, who's on The Office, and he was Jack Ryan on Netflix thing, and he had a digital prom night, which I thought, that's so cool. What initiative do you need to take? What thing do you need to do right now that you're not doing, that you're putting off? Because if you do it, that's inspiring. The next one is champions change. And I've been thinking about face masks. Now, last night I was very careful, but I went to a nursery to get my tomato plants. I need to plant my tomatoes pretty soon. And I'd say that about 20% of the people there had face masks on. That's all. What do we have to do to get people to wear their face masks? Because doing it is going to help everyone. It's going to help those who have the virus and those that don't not spread it or not get it. And so as you think about all the changes that have gone on, if you thought about it and you said, gee, we're going to have a worldwide event where people stay home, where everybody across the globe stays home for a period of time. That would be hard to imagine, but they've pulled it off. And we have such great examples of people championing change. And again, inspiring leaders find ways and they embrace change and they get others to change. Last one, Jack.
Yep, and the last one is serving as a good role model. I was kind of struck by one of the governors who, in giving his briefing, said, I'll never ask you to do anything that I'm not doing. I'll never ask you to go anywhere or do anything that I'm not willing to go or what I'm not willing to do. Then we see examples of leaders who don't quite do it that way. And there's something very powerful about recommending an action, saying, do what you see me doing, and the organization will function smoothly as a result. So I guess we would say here in summary that these 10 techniques, notice the variety in them, notice the widely different ways. So it's clear that there's not one way to be inspiring and motivating. There are lots of ways. And we would encourage you to kind of ponder these. And Joe, I think you've got some comments about what you can do to be more inspiring.
Well, and let me tell you the really good news. The really, really good news is you don't have to be great at every one of these. In fact, as long as none of these are fatal flaws, and in fact, you're terrible at it, right? If none of them are fatal flaws, then if you can just do one or two of these really well, it's really going to make a difference. It's going to help you to be more inspiring. So what I challenge you to do is identify one or two of these behaviors that would make you a more inspiring leader, that you have a passion for, and also what would help you to be do better in your current job in the organization. What would be better for you there? We're going to provide you with a development guide that gives you some specific ideas and suggestions about what you could do on each one of the 10 companion behaviors. And, you know, we know that people can get better at this. Jack, what does this graph tell us?
Yeah, so this graph was a small study that we conducted, and it was pertaining to 157 leaders. And at the beginning, this group that we were studying was at the 33rd percentile. They were not great at this. But after a period of 6 months or more, we did a retest of them. They had selected this as a capability or competency that they wanted to improve. And the dramatic kind of consequence was that this group moved collectively from the 33rd percentile to the 73rd percentile. So it's just a wonderful reminder that this behavior is not fixed. You are not set in concrete. You can get better. And we see this illustrated by this small study of 157 leaders.
And Jack, to emphasize that a little bit, on that same study, we looked at every one of the competencies. And what we saw is that, again, on the post-test data, that every one of the competencies moved. And that reinforced our notion that when you change these companion behaviors, that improves the competency of inspires and motivates others. So as you think about different leaders like Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey. Now, they're both inspiring, but the way they go about it is very different. And so there isn't one size fits all for inspiring. There can be different ways of approaching people. Warren Buffett, he writes op-eds in the Wall Street Journal. Oprah gets on and makes specials and makes broadcasts and speeches, and she does a great job. They communicate differently. They make an emotional connection in different ways, but they're both inspiring. You too can be inspiring. Use your own style and your own approach and the way you go about it. And there's this great quote, inspirational leadership is not about a single ingredient. It's all about the recipe. And it comes about by combining the ingredients. Find a great quote like this that's written by Jack and I'm sure Jack came up with it. So that's our quote for the day. We'd love some feedback from you. There's a feedback assessment, and if you go in and do the feedback assessment, we'll provide a link for you to download the development guide, and it's in that feedback assessment. So if your browser window didn't automatically open up, if you can go to the link bit.ly Webcast APR 4, and that'll give us some feedback. We appreciate the feedback, and it also tell you how you can contact us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you guys are interested in this webinar, if you'd like to do something for your folks at work, if inspiration would be a good topic to talk about with your folks, let us know, and we'll certainly support you in that, provide you some recordings of this webcast, or we can do this live for your folks. And again, give us some feedback. Go to that site, bit.ly Webcast APR 4. Thank you so much, Jack. Thanks for joining me on this.
Yep.
Have a great day.